I'm Dmitry from Ethereum Foundation. I've been working on tests for a really long time now. And I think it is time now to introduce our new approach. For a long time we used CPP client to generate the tests. And just recently, here in Berlin, we discussed this, and we came to agreement that we could move the test generation and test execution into a separate test framework tool, which could interact with clients, and every client could potentially be a test generator or could be tested by the test tool to run all of the tests that we have. So I would like to remind you how our testing works at the moment. Here I opened the state test example in the current format. So you could see that it has a pre-state of accounts that we have in our state before the transaction execution. It has a transaction description, which basically a set of transactions that are applied to this pre-state, and you could call with this transaction. You could make a call to with the transaction to a contract. You could create new contract. You could call contract which call other contracts and execute a different code that you specify in the pre-state. And then you basically write the expectation section, which checks the result for your transaction for every hard fork that we have. And with this expectation, you could check that after transaction execution, the state is changed, the gas is equal to what you expect it to be equal after your transaction execution, and check basically every opcode in the Ethereum virtual machine. And currently we have many tests like that. And this is a state test, it's a basic one transaction execution. We also have a blockchain test with many transactions and many blocks being imported. And in the current model we have Hive tool, which basically transcodes all of the blockchain tests that we have into the clients. And to do that, client developers have to provide Docker container to the Hive tool and have to write script which would integrate the test and the blocks into the client and run the test execution. And I come up with this idea to create a test tool which would use RPC protocol communication with the client and feed the existing test to the client. So you could debug the specific transaction, specific tests, and compare it with the other clients. This tool is still in development. Although it has successfully been implemented in CPP client, I could run all existing state tests with it. I could generate the state test. I could make a blockchain test out of it. And all I need from the client developers now is just support. And if you implement just a couple more RPC methods, we could make this tool work. And you could run the existing state tests and blockchain tests, and you don't even need to worry about Hive and making your own script, and you will be able to debug any test that you want. So I just want to show you how it works. So this tool starts a CPP client right now, and it will execute a test which is a ST example in general status that you could see the test source on the background. And it just had been successfully executed on a CPP client. And what it does, it just sent an RPC command to the CPP client with initial chain params. So at first, I already opened an issue about this set chain params function, because we don't have like a standard. Every client has different field names, has different ways of making genesis.json, and if we could make a standard about this, it would be nice. So the first method just tells the client to start a new chain with frontier rules, or you could set like any kind of fork transition block number, and you could set the genesis configurations here. And the pre-state accounts basically set here as well. And after that, it will transfer with RPC methods the transactions that it required to execute or blocks, and ask the client what result did it got after the execution of those. Like, this is, after importing a block, it asks the client to get the block and get the information of the state, and the test tool compares the result to the post state provided in the test itself. So after the test is done, it continues, it resets the client to a new state, a new fork, and continue execution. So what kind of RPC methods does this tool use? If you go to GitHub, Ethereum, Ethereum retest, as I call it, in the issues I have a protocol specification. So in the current situation, I need a way to start a new node, a new client with the specific parameters. I need to set up the path to the database and the test to tell that the client should be running in a test mode with the support of these new test methods. And we could also discuss this format. It's not mandatory. We could discuss how to do it. Maybe, well, I heard that parity could not be like reset. It requires to restart the client each time you want to change the chain params. It's okay. And here's the new methods that I use. The set chain params, it could also be like just a client restart with a command line. And yeah, this one is a method that I need to feed the client like a raw transaction LP, and I also need a way to get transaction from the client. Then this test mine blocks basically tells the client to create a block from the transactions that it received with the previous methods. So I feed transaction, ask the client to generate a block, then I could ask the client to export this block in order to import to other clients. Or if we're speaking about test generation, I would like to ask the client to generate a mal format block, which I would to import into other clients. For example, I could ask the client to generate a block on a frontier rules and import it to homestead rules and see what happens. Modify timestamp required to set up the distance between block in order to check the difficulty change and stuff like that. Rewind to block is basically resetting the client to specified block number. It's like chain reorg. And methods to get the information about the post state from the client. So it's not complete yet. I'm still investigating what kind of methods I would need to generate the test, but this set of methods is enough to run the state test, to run the blockchain test in the current model. And I already did a pull request to a CPP client. It works with CPP client, but CPP client is not optimized. Each RPC method that I call the RPC client is getting so much time, and this is because of internal structure of the CPP client. So I desperately need somebody to implement those methods in some other client and see what result will we get from there. I know many of you guys developing like a new Ethereum client, and you want to run the existing tests. So I suggest we cooperate together with this couple of RPC methods. With this, I could like develop this tool, and you could use this tool to run the existing test suites, and you don't have to worry about the JSON parsing of the test, because the JSON format of the test might change, and you don't need to adjust. You will just implement those methods, and that's it. I see it's easier. And compared to Hive, if you create a Docker container, and you will need just to create the script, which will basically integrate your client into Hive. But Hive doesn't provide you with debugging tools. So if in addition to this, if we come up with debugging RPC methods, we could like specify a specific test, like test with this name, with this transaction, with these parameters, like get the VM trace of the transaction. If it's failing, you're like getting the VM debug trace. So I think it's really nice idea. And I would like to hear like questions right now from you and discuss this. So, thank you guys.
Hi, Dmitry. Can you scroll a little bit back to the mining thing? You said that you can ask the client to introduce the invalid transaction in the block, but how you would do that with these methods?
Some blockchains, upon generation, deliberately create invalid blocks, but these mine blocks will create only valid block. So I will need another way of like telling the client to mine invalid block.
So it's not in this RPC commands yet? It's not possible?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
But it's not required for everybody, only for those clients who would like to generate the tests. If you're running tests, you will just use the mine block.
Oh, okay, I understand.
How many people work on implementing Ethereum client? So it's, wow. So it's about 7 people, I guess, even more. So the problem here is that we don't have standards. We need to develop standards like this. I don't know, every client has its own unique differences, and we could adjust and find like a solution which could satisfy all of the client developers.
If you still have some time, can you show us the examples of the blockchain tests, if you can?
Yeah.
And just explain them, like what are they?
The blockchain test is a core test for Ethereum clients right now. I could show you the previous one, example test from state test could be converted into blockchain test, and it will look like this. So it has a Byzantium version of this test. In the description it has a genesis, a block RLP, and a header description of genesis. Although it's not actually required to set all of those fields, it's just a high requirement, but you actually don't need many of those genesis fields. And it also has like the same pre-state of accounts, and transaction from the state test, it's converted into a block. Here, the block array here. This is basically decoding of the RLP. What client in Hive do is just importing this RLP with this block header above and the transaction below. This transaction contains a signature and it's just going to be executed, and then Hive asks about the post-state information, and the post-state information should have this field in account changed to 2 because it's an addition operation, which is this code here. And that's about it. The blockchain tests have basically the same as a state test, just that information is inside blocks, and block RLP is being imported one by one, and then you get the post state and compare it to what you have. The main difference here is that you could have many different versions of one block, or you could create side chains. You could test such scenarios where you have many different blocks. Okay, and blocks could have many different transactions as well. Yeah?
So at first glance, it seems to me that it's a bit easier to implement the regular test runner than implementing such an XML RPC interface. So a project such as ours, which is just starting, it takes less effort for us, and have a test runner ready to execute the test suite, even before we have implemented the XML RPC interface. But the value I see here is that this can automate tests involving multiple clients talking together. If there is a single test runner, orchestrating some kind of communication between the clients. Is this already implemented in some way? Is it in the pipeline?
Yeah, I guess Hive did such work. It could run clients in this network simulation mode. Although I'm not a Hive developer, I don't know about that. But it's really, yeah, it's possible with any kind of tool. I could do this as well with my tool, with the RPC test runner.
Is there somewhere where test results are collected and compared across clients and sort of published so that you can have like an overview of which client supports what? Well, when you have like optional, like certain extensions, let's call them, sync methods and so on that only some clients support.
So currently cross-client results are in Hive. It's being executed like every day, and each client that is registered with Hive, which has its script runner, it being fed with the most recent test from the developed by Hive. And you get the results here in a web page with the Hive results.
Can you show us?
I'm not a Hive developer.
No, it's available on the internet.
Yeah, I guess if you know the exact link right now, what's the current link? Hive stats. What's the link?
I think, I'm not sure actually. I can check myself.
So, with my tool, I cannot, I could provide the result only from CPP client, because I'm working with CPP client right now, I'm implementing those RPC methods inside CPP. But well, I think about implementing those methods in Go client as well, so that could be something.
So what would it take for the Go client to use the same framework?
Just add another 3 or 4 RPC methods. So as I said that these RPC methods are not final. We could discuss and we could make proposals and see what could we come up with.
All right, so I suggest that we take 20 minutes now. People that are interested in this particular problem can just congregate in one area.
Yeah, okay, that would be nice.
Sit down, have a chat, and then soon we'll pick up the next talk. All right, thank you.
Thank you.